Good morning. Good morning. It is Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. East Coast time, 7 a.m. Central time, 6 Mountain. I think it's 6 Pacific time. Actually, I'm all crazy on my time zones this morning because I'm really excited about what I want to share today and what I want to talk about. And you can see it on the screen. You can see it in the caption. Is a question that I got asked recently at a meeting. And when I mean recently, this is not just a question that I got one time. This is a question that I get over and over again. Is that, Anton, what are we going to do? Is DEI going to die? Are we going to backtrack on all of the progress that we made around diversity, equity, and inclusion? Now, you might be asking, Anton, why are you getting asked this question? Well, for those of you who don't know, about, 28 years, I've been working in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a matter of fact, I was working in this space before it was called diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, we didn't really have a DEI term, a terminology for it. It was about diversity and about inclusion and around making sure that every person, regardless of what you look like, who you love, how you are able, all of these contexts, that we created safe spaces and inclusive spaces for you to do your job, work, live successful, productive, and engaged lives. And so I've been working on this stuff for a very long time. More recently in my career, I'm a former chief diversity officer at a large academic hospital. So it was my job to build an inclusive culture, or to make sure that leaders understood what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually meant. How do we operationalize it, and to do that work? Well, we have seen that in 2020, when George Floyd unfortunately lost his life to the hands of 4 bad police officers who literally killed him on a street in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in front of people, that our nation had a reckoning around diversity, that they recognized that racial bias, gender bias, all kinds of biases existed, and that companies were going to pledge to do something about it. And so you saw a rash of progress on diversity, equity, and inclusion in 2020. You saw it in 2021, but slowly but surely in 2022, it started to go in the opposite direction. And what do I mean, the opposite direction? There was some backtracking on DEI, but not just backtracking and to say, hey, it's not a priority anymore. We saw that from some companies, but we also saw DEI get very political. Now, when I mean very political, I'm literally talking about you had some politicians and policymakers decide to pass legislation to stop people from being educated and empowered through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, let me give you a couple of examples of what I mean, the politics around DEI. I have to take my glasses off because I got a little smudge on my face. But here's what I want you to recognize, that when Donald Trump was president of the United States, he signed an executive order into law that literally banned every federal agency from hiring anybody or bringing in anybody to do any kind of training on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The reason why I know this, because I can't get into all of the details, but I will tell you that I was actually in talks with a large federal agency and a division to put together some diversity, equity, and inclusion training for all of the leadership in this agency. It was some 700 people around the country who needed to understand the value of diversity, the value of including people, and how to achieve equity and how it delivered its programs and services. But unfortunately, when that executive order was signed into law, I was prohibited from doing the work. They were prohibited from even talking about it. They just couldn't bring it up anymore. And so that opportunity went away and it was unrealized. That's one example. Another example we see currently that there are about 25 states in the United States of America who have either introduced legislation or outright passed legislation into law to ban DEI officers and programming in all of its state agencies, like literally into education. You know, and you probably know, if you don't know, I'm going to tell you now, that the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, was probably one of the most vocal and aggressive anti-DEI governors that we have ever seen. Everything from dismantling the board of trustees at a state university because they supported DEI. He put new people into place. He's tried to get rid of people in agencies. And he has this mantra that Florida is the state where woke goes to die. You probably have heard that term woke, and it probably has a negative connotation to you. But let me give you a little bit of history, and I'm going to tell you the reason why I'm giving you this backstory, because I want to help you to understand what you can do to make sure that these anti-DEI efforts do not work in your company or your organization, and that DEI doesn't die, and that you're actually going to be better because of it, that you're going to be more successful because of it. You're going to make more money because of it. You're going to have a bigger impact because of it. And you're going to be on the right side of history rather than on the wrong side of history. Okay. So let me get back to it. The main point, that the reason why I bring up Ron DeSantis and the term woke is this. That word woke, I want you to just go back to the basics of the word. Woke is some derivative of being awake. Okay. We know that being awake is something that we spend at least 2/3 of our lives doing. We're awake every day. Sometimes we feel sleepy, but we generally only sleep about 1/3 of our lives, 8 hours a day. Most of us, if we get 8 hours, I don't get 8 hours. So I'm awake a lot more than I'm asleep. Now, the term awake and woke and all of these things is the acknowledgement that you are aware that people have differences. You are aware of diversity. You are aware that people have different experiences in this world. And so the original term was a term that I know we used to use in hip hop, is you needed to stay woke to what the system was doing to hurt you. You needed to stay woke around all of the unfairness and injustice and the wrong things that happen in the world. That a smart thing to do is to stay woke. Well, in 2020, that term was outsized around staying aware of racial injustice, staying aware of the biases that exist, stay aware of your surroundings, stay aware of all of the things that could be going wrong. Your job was to stay woke. So stay woke. Well, it got into the political lexicon. I really don't know how, but I can tell you that Ron DeSantis doesn't want people in the state of Florida to stay woke or to stay awake and understand their diversity or understand differences. What he wants to do is he wants to put you to sleep. Now, we know sleep is good, but do you want to sleepwalk through your life? Do you want to sleepwalk through your career? Do you want to not be aware of every opportunity you could have to accelerate your growth, improve your development, and make more money? Who wants to sleep through and miss opportunities? Nobody. At least not anybody that I know of that has any common sense. Everybody wants to be aware of whatever opportunity we can have, right? So my context for you is this: that DEI If it dies, that means we all have gone to sleep. Now, I don't anticipate that any one of us are going to go to sleep at any point in time, but I want us to be fully aware that there is backlash, resistance, anti DEI legislation. There are companies who are changing their policies and doing things to say that, you know what, we're not going to invest in DEI. Now, let me break it down to you of where this also has filtered its way into education. Okay. Now, when I mean filtered its way into education, the Supreme Court has become very political. And this is not a political blog today or political conversation, but I'm giving you context because I want you to have the context. The Supreme Court has set new precedent by striking down race as a factor that can be used in college admissions with a Supreme Court decision last year. I think it was a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And when they did this, they told colleges and universities, you cannot use race as a criteria to admit students into the university. You got to use other factors, and race cannot be one of them. Now, universities have been using race for a very long time, okay? And it's been a good thing to increase the diversity at higher education institutions, but the Supreme Court said they can't do it. Now, when the Supreme Court said they couldn't do it, that gave a license to litigious people. Let me just say it that way. People who literally wanted to file lawsuits against companies for using race-based decision-making, not to hire and fire, but to create programs. So for instance, if your company had a women's leadership development program, and when I say race, I'm talking all aspects of diversity. So let's say your company had a women's leadership development program, and they only put 20 women a year in this leadership development program. And they set aside 5 of the 20 slots for African-American women. And then they set aside 5 more slots for Hispanic women in the company to give them opportunities to be leaders. Well, now white women could file a lawsuit against your company and say that you carving out 10 slots for women based upon race and ethnicity is a violation of the law based upon the Supreme Court decision. So your company will get sued. Now, whether they win or not, I don't know. But I know that most general counsels and most boards of companies are risk adverse. Their job is to mitigate risk, not exacerbate risk. So the last thing they want is to be drawn into a lawsuit. The last thing they want is to be on TV with a lawsuit in the press. The last thing that they want is for it to get out in the industry that they're being sued. Lawsuits cost money. And especially if you lose, the judgments can be very sizable. So no company wants to get sued. So you had some general counsels that said to the CEO and the leadership of the company, we need to get rid of not the women's leadership development program. We need to get rid of the diversity slots in the women leadership development program. Even though we know we lack women of color in leadership roles and we should be doing a good job of it, but we need to get rid of this program. Let's scrub it from our website. Let's scrub it from everything that we're doing, because that way nobody will come after us with a lawsuit. You literally had a third of companies that started scrubbing their programs for African-American leadership or for Asian leadership or Hispanic leadership, or even college internship programs. Like sometimes schools would have programs that focus on diverse students to bring them in for internships. And you literally could have non-diverse students file a lawsuit and say, this program is discriminating against us. You could also have students of color that if they were in a different group, because the whole Supreme Court case around overturning affirmative action and taking race out of college admissions started with a lawsuit from Asian students who felt like they were losing slots to attend Ivy League schools or high-level schools to African-American students because of their race. So this is very complicated. I'm saying a lot to you to say that it is complicated. So you had these things happening companies being afraid that they're going to get sued, they've gotten rid of some of their programs. Now, you got other companies who are like, we know diversity is a good thing. We know it's been beneficial to us, but I'm just scared that we're going to get sued. We haven't been sued yet. So let's find a way to reconfigure our program and get rid of the word diversity in it. So it looks like that we're not doing anything focused on diversity, but we just changed the word. So let's say you had a leadership diversity initiative at your company, and you called the program Leadership Diversity Initiative, and it's been called that for the previous 10 years. Well, now, after the Supreme Court decision and all of these anti-DEI laws that are being passed, you are literally going to change the name of that program from Leadership Diversity Initiative to Leadership Development Initiative. So you changed the name of it, you took the word diversity out, and you made it development. Now you're still going to do the same thing, target women, target people of color, target underrepresented minorities, target people who don't get leadership opportunities. Your program may look the same in terms of the people you bring in, but you had to change the name to protect the innocence of what you're doing. There are companies who change the name of all of their programs. There are universities who literally took the word diversity, equity, and inclusion out of vice president's title and senior vice presidents for diversity and inclusion, and they changed their titles to the senior vice president of access and opportunity. They're creating access and opportunity for people who look differently than the traditional people in the program, but they just got rid of the word diversity. So you might see that in some places, okay, which is a smart thing and a good thing to do. So that's like the second third of companies who are doing that. So some companies got rid of all of their programming. Second set of companies kind of changed the name of the program. But then you got this third set. The third set of the one I want to spend the rest of the time talking about today is the companies who recognize that not only is diversity, equity, and inclusion the right thing to do, it has been great for their business, that they make more money. They are more profitable than their peers, that they have better outcomes, that they do everything better because they have embraced diversity and inclusion. And that if they kill off their DEI efforts, then their business and company is going to die. So they said, to heck with the Supreme Court, the heck with the state passing this legislation. We're going to do what we're going to do and dare you to try to stop our business model. One example of that in Florida is Disney. It's the reason why I own Disney stock. It's the reason why I'm still going to Disney World. It's the reason why I'm still involved as much as I can with everything related to Disney. Disney Plus, I've been watching X-Men 97 and giving it a good run because Disney says, you know what? You're not going to discriminate against the LGBTQ community that is a big part of our workforce and our community. And we're not going to get down with you, Ron DeSantis, and your anti-woke legislation, your anti-DEI, your anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. We're not going to get down with that. Disney is ride or die and fully invested in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, they're not perfect. I'm not saying that they are. They got a lot more work to do in terms of their senior leadership ranks. But you literally had anti-DEI people try to take control of their board of directors last year. There's some activists who are anti-DEI and literally tried to boot off the CEO and all of the board at Disney to take over, a shareholder takeover, if you will, because they're so anti-DEI. So I want you to see this stuff gets deep and it goes a lot of places. I'm going to give you another company in the state of Texas. Now, I see my friend Kelly Christie is logged in and she had a few comments. She lives in the state of Texas. I think you're still in Texas. But here's what I want you to know, that Texas has been aggressive against DEI, like really aggressive. So the same way Governor DeSantis in Florida has been aggressive, so has the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott. And he's tried to do a lot of things that are anti-DEI, even like, making it hostile for women and others. Because again, women are a part of diversity. Let's be clear. There's a lot of things that are going on. Well, there's a company headquartered in Texas who said, the heck with Governor Abbott And the heck with this anti-DEI stuff. DEI is good for our business and good for what we're doing. And I'm not backing away from it. And that company is HP Enterprises. So HP Enterprise, not enterprises, but enterprise. HP Enterprise is the tech solution, like cloud-based solutions. They provide enterprise solutions to a lot of companies. Their CEO, Antonio Neri, and I were together in a meeting back in February in New York City. We were at NASDAQ of all places. And I heard him literally say, oh, he got asked a question. So what are you doing? You're headquartered in Texas. You're pro diversity. You're winning awards for your diversity work. But literally, you're in a state that is hostile to diversity. And he basically said 50% of my leadership team is women, 50% of my board is women. I'm in IT. That's a field that is not really supportive of women. And I'm driving diversity, and we're doing more and more. We haven't done enough. He says there's a lot more we need to change. And then he also later said in a subsequent interview that the biggest challenge to diversity is not, he didn't say this part. I'm going to just say what he said. I'm not going to say what I interpreted. He said the biggest challenge is the mindset of middle managers, that you have people who are in middle management who are literally not open to diversity and inclusion, or they don't know what to do to diversity and inclusion in support of diversity and inclusion. So what am I saying to you, and what am I putting out here today is that for the next few minutes, I'm going to give you 4 things that you, not anybody else, you as a leader in your organization can do to counteract, to work against this anti-DEI culture that is starting to explode in states, in policies, and inside organization. Sometimes it's just an anti-DEI language, the politics of language, but sometimes this is real world stuff. So I want to give it to you in a way that you can counteract this stuff. Now, when I mean counteract it, I'm going to give you some tools that you can use. And if you go to antongunn.com, click on my leadership resources, I got a lot of tools, but I'm going to just give you some free game. That's what I call it today, some free game. And if you know a leader who is anti-DEI, if you know a leader who doesn't value diversity, if you know someone who literally doesn't get it, you might want to consider sharing this with them. Now, you got to have a little courage on yourself to share it with them, but I want to share it with them because I want them to understand that this is important. And if you know somebody who's in a leadership role who is supportive of DEI, but not necessarily knowing what to do, or maybe there's legislation or policy that's been passed inside of your company and you got a memo that says you can't do what you've been doing anymore, then this is going to be good for them too. And the last piece, the shout out goes to all of my former chief diversity officers. And the reason why I say they're former, because a lot of them got hired in 2020, and here we are 4 years later, they don't work at that company anymore because the company was hostile to DEI in the first place. The leadership team was hostile to DEI. They only did it out of pressure because of what happened to George Floyd. They really weren't committed to it. They didn't value it. They weren't believing it. Okay. And so you can tell who these companies are. Just go to their website. Go to their website, click on their leadership team, and look at the top 10 leaders in the company. And promise you won't see anybody that fits any definition of diversity. You might find a woman, maybe. You might find one person of color who either is in HR or maybe they're an IT leader, but you won't find real diversity. You got 10 leaders, you won't find 30%, 3 people on their site. So I want you to know that this stuff is real. And now I want to give you some tools on what you can do about this. So the first answer, the first thing is you can do, the first strategy to make sure that DEI doesn't die, to counteract all of this negative energy around DEI. The first thing you should do is to be transparent and open in your communications about this. Now, what do I mean transparent in communication? It's gotten so bad that we throw around acronyms. I've been saying DEI a lot in this live. DEI. DEI, DEI. There's another term that gets thrown around is BIPOC, BIPOC. That's a term that get thrown around a lot. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, you need to stop using these acronyms and slang terms for diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you want to talk about people of color, then say people of color. The I is for indigenous people. Okay. So use the terms. We want to make our company inclusive for indigenous people. We want to make our culture inclusive of people of color. We want to make our culture inclusive of people who have racial and ethnic diversity. We want to make our culture inclusive for people with disabilities or people who are able differently. So stop using these acronyms for diversity, equity, and inclusion and use the words. Be transparent and use the words and say what you mean. Don't worry about putting it in policy and putting it on a piece of paper. You have to use these words and you got to openly communicate around what you don't know about these words and get yourself some education and be transparent about the education that you're getting. So, for example, if you wanted to take a course on how to lead diverse teams, you need to check out my leadership learning library because I have an 8-part video course on leading diverse teams where I unpack some of these terms and I give people some education around how diversity and inclusion matters. You got to understand, what does equity mean? Like, I remember when I was working in academic medicine at a hospital system, the first time I used the term equity, I had a physician, a white male physician, older white male physician, says, you should stop using that term. I said, well, why? He says, because when I hear equity, I think about the equity in my house. I said, okay, well, I appreciate your education for me about it because I know what equity in a house means for me. Means I got some value and some money. And I said to him, I want you to interpret this equity to be the same way. Are you providing value and money to people who disproportionately look different than you and don't get the opportunities that you get? Are you providing equitable value and money to the women in leadership? Now, we all know that there's been pay inequities with women for a long time. Every dollar a man makes, a woman makes 72 cents. I mean, that's been going on since the 70s. I know that term. But also the same with people of color. The same with people of color. And I can tell you factually this statistic, and I'm not going to use it as a statistic. I'm going to give you this example, factual example, that you had a team of leaders that worked in a large organization. They're all C-suite leaders. They're all C-suite. They're all in charge of the entire 10,000 person organization, in charge of doing all of the work and getting things done. Did you know that the women and the people of color in this organization who are in the C-suite made between 30 and 40% less than what the white men in these organizations made? 30 to 40%. And they didn't know it. They all thought that they were being paid equitably because they're all senior leaders who are stewards on the management team of this company. But they weren't being paid equitably. They weren't being paid equitably. So you got to have some equity and understand what equity is and do some equity. And all of these things that I'm saying to you now is really around fostering transparency and open communications around this subject. Stop using the acronyms and the terms and say what you mean. It's okay to spell out and say it in this way. So for an example, I've been in conferences as a keynote speaker and acknowledged that the room is very white. That's true. That's a factual statement. If I look around the room and there's 500 leaders in this room and I can count 10 people of color on one hand, then that's true, right? Same with gender. This room is very male. You can say these things. Again, transparent communication. That's your job as a leader. Your job, you can't be shrinking away from tough conversations, crucial conversations. You got to find the words that work. And I actually have a resource that is on my website called Words That Work. If you go to free resources on antongunn.com, I got a document called Words That Work, which are helping you to come up with the right words to talk about race in the workplace and other difficult subjects. That's what the first strategy is that we all have to be consistent and clear with open communications and transparency around this topic. We got to be focused on that, period. If we do that, things will get better. The second strategy that you have to focus on, and I'm coming to a close because I know I've been on fairly long today. I usually don't go this long, but I felt kind of impassioned about this after a couple of experiences this past week. So the second thing you can do if you want to make sure that DEI doesn't die and you counteract some of this stuff is that you have to empower your teams through education. So what do I mean empower your teams? Like we all have biases, but most of us don't know what our biases are. So you as a leader can acknowledge that biases or blind spots are bad things. We all know if we were driving a car, a blind spot is a dangerous thing. And so cars have been made in the modern times with more tools and resources for you to eliminate those blind spots. The reason why you got a rear view camera in the newer model cars that you don't have to try to turn around and look and figure out where you're backing into a space. They gave you the rear view camera on your dashboard or inside your car is to eliminate a blind spot. The reason why your rear view mirror on your windshield is wider is to eliminate a blind spot. The reason why your side mirrors have these, my car has these automatic lights that come on when you got your turn signal on and there's a car beside you. It's another notification to help you to eliminate a blind spot so you don't crash and get into an accident or you don't hurt somebody else. See, blind spots can hurt people. And as a leader in your company, your job needs to be focused on eliminating the blind spots that might be hurtful to people on your team, hurtful in your organization, which means you need to educate people about their biases. Now, I do bias training, but I know some people who are phenomenal at doing bias training, unconscious bias training. My man, Tony Chapman, is a great example of that. Reach Beyond Solutions and Dr. Siobhan Arline Bradley, someone who I work with. These are great people who do bias training. Dr. Shirley Davis is another one. There's so many people who can do bias training, who can show you a different way to think, alert you to your biases. Like I said, I do it myself, but I always do it in the context of helping you to be a better leader because there's nothing worse than an executive with blind spots. There's nothing worse with an executive who has a blind spot. So that's the second thing you can do is to educate and empower your team through training around blind spots, around dimensions of diversity, on the language and how it changes. Because the language around diversity don't stay the same, it changes. So make sure that you're empowering your team. That's your responsibility as a leader. The third thing you can do is you can build a culture of inclusion. Now, when I say a culture of inclusion is don't make decisions in a vacuum. Don't be having isolated meetings and deciding that certain people don't need to be invited to the meeting. Everything is on a need to know basis. That's not a culture of inclusion. Because what tends to happen, the only people you invite to a meeting are the people who already think like you, who going to attaboy your decision, who going to agree and be yes men and yes women to your decision. You got to build a culture of inclusion that makes sure that everybody that works for you feels valued, feels respected, and feels visible in the workplace. So don't be having company picnics and only inviting a few people, or more specifically, hosting a happy hour out at the country club and you choose to leave out all of the women and the people of color from your organization. Or because Bob is in a wheelchair, you think that Bob doesn't want to come to the country club and play golf. Bob can do whatever he wants to do. You need to make sure that he is included. Give him the opportunity to say no. Don't say no for people. You need to create a culture of inclusion. So my context for you is the third strategy to make sure that DEI doesn't die is really build a culture of inclusion. That's what you got to do. Now, here's the fourth one, the most important one, and that is you as a leader need to lead by example. Now, what do I mean lead by example? I want you to think about your direct reports right now. I want you to think about the people who immediately report to you that you do an evaluation for every year. The group should be small, no more than 5. If your span of control is more than 5 people that you're doing evaluations for, you can't possibly effectively supervise 5 people. So you need to probably get a deputy or a number 2 to take some of those direct reports off your hand. But let's say you got 5 people that you all hired. You hired every last one of these people and brought them on your team. What do they look like? Do they all look just like you? Are they the same gender, the same race? Did they go to the same college or university that you went to? Were they credentialed in the same way? Did you bring them with you from your last job? If they all look just like you, then I'm telling you, they all think just like you. That's not leading by example. Because the one question that people are going to ask when you get out here talking with transparency about diversity and saying that we want to train everybody, we're going to empower our people to be trained because we have a culture of inclusion. Like those first 3 bullets, you can say all of those things and even try to do all of those things. But everybody's going to look right at your team and say, what does her team look like? What does his team look like? If the team looks just like you ain't leading by example. If you're not interviewing diverse candidates, you're not leading by example. If you're not advocating for, we need to make sure that we have a diversity of thought, functional diversity, racial diversity, gender diversity, geographic diversity. If you're not leading by example, if you don't have a diverse team and you don't have a diverse hiring process, you talking the talk, but nobody believes you. You are the emperor with no clothes. So I don't want you to be the emperor with no clothes. That's why I want you to lead by example. I want you to be open in your communication. I want you to make sure that you empower your team through education and training around these topics. And I want to make sure that you build a culture of inclusion. Do those things, lead by example. And that's how you're going to counteract this DEI, this anti-DEI backlash. And if you're not in a leadership position, let's say you work solo, you can still do these things. You can talk about it. You can educate yourself, educate your colleagues, and be inclusive yourself in everything that you do. And that's the example that needs to be set. So I hope this added some value to you all today. I feel like the chat was on fire a little bit. A lot of people chiming in and logging in. So glad to see it. I appreciate you all listening and rocking with me today. I usually don't acknowledge the chat. I don't know why, because I want to get this content out and not be distracted because y'all be saying some things that could easily get me off track. But I thank you all for your time and your attention today. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Remember, see y'all next Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel. I got some important stuff that I'll be coming with soon. And when I say some important stuff, if you are interested in being a part of a launch team, and when I mean a launch team, I'm getting ready to share some research that I've done with the world. And I want some people who will be willing to help me to share this information with others. If you would like to be a part of what I'm doing, I want you to send me a direct message. Feel free to send me a direct message and let me know, or you just put your hand raised in the comment. Do whatever you can to put your hand raised in the comment. And no, you don't get paid. This is free work. I got that from a good friend of mine. I wish I could pay you, but it really is just sharing on social media, kind of like what we're doing right now. I've seen a lot of you tag a lot of folks in to the content that I laid out. So it's really is something just to share, to talk about, and also to share your story, because I want you to know we all have some truth about what we have experienced in the workplace. And I want to hear that truth and I want us to share it. So look forward to more of that. Please send me a message, raise your hand. I love to have you along for the journey. Again, my job and my goal is to try to have an impact to make organizations better, to make people better, to build a better culture, and to help you to become a leader that everybody will admire. And so thank you for your time and your attention, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.